Okay, well, I think we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, good morning. My name is Mia Zwolensky, and I am the Associate Director and Research Coordinator at Texas Sea Grant at Texas A&M University. And I welcome you to our first of two webinars that we're hosting for our Texas Sea Grant RFP for the years 2024 through 2026 funding. And we will be covering the pre-proposal phase of this competition. And I wanted to welcome you and let you know, starting out, what our goals will be for today. We will be discussing the differences between Sea Grant funding and competitive funding opportunities from other sponsors of research. We will describe how the research priorities were developed. We will review the pre-proposal preparation and development and submission requirements. We'll give you an overview of the life after a pre-proposal is submitted. I will provide an information related to the system where the pre-proposals will be submitted through at InfoReady online system and guide you through that. And then lastly, we will answer any of your questions so that you can, as we go through our presentation and as you're thinking of things and you might write them down, but try to save the questions towards the end. The webinar is being recorded, and this recording and our presentation documents will be made publicly available on our Texas Sea Grant website. So, save your questions if you can towards the end, and we will leave time for that Q&A, and you can enter your question in the chat. And that will be good. We have one of our communication specialists, Allie Dickey, who will be monitoring the chat for us. But for now, I wanted to introduce you to our director of the Texas Sea Grant College program here at Texas A&M University, Dr. Pamela Plotkin, and so that she will be able to provide her presentation. And so I will stop sharing my screen so that she may take over and add her presentation shared screen.
Howdy and good morning. Thank you for joining us to learn about our new RFP for 2024-2026. I'm going to kick us off and share with you some of our information that is already in the RFP, but I want to review it with you all in a way that I hope is going to be meaningful. So I like to start off by talking about what Texas Sea Grant wants to fund. And this is the question that we get every 2 years from everybody. What exactly does Texas Sea Grant want to fund? So here you've got the answers outlined on this slide for you in 6 very brief bullets. And I'm going to go over each one of these during my presentation this morning. So the very first one is we want to support research that aligns with our Texas strategic plan goals. And we just published a new strategic plan. It's available on our website. And we'll talk more about that in my presentation as well as Mia's presentation. And our strategic plan is a document that we are required to develop every 4 years. And the National Sea Grant Office reviews that plan to make sure it aligns with their plan. And we receive approval for what we put into our plan. And part of our strategic plan involves the research that we fund. And so any research that we fund has to address one or more of our plan goals, because our program is required to do that by the National Sea Grant Office, and because we're evaluated every 4 years by an external review committee that expects to see our research projects that we fund aligned with our goals and helping to achieve those goals that we set forth in that plan. So it's a important document. It's not one that we develop and then put in a drawer and dust off every few years. We're held accountable for achieving the goals in our strategic plan every 4 years. Next bullet down, we're interested in funding research that addresses one of Texas Sea Grant research priorities, and I'll talk about those in detail in a few minutes. We're interested in funding integrated research and extension projects that improve the understanding, wise use, and stewardship of Texas's coastal and marine resources, and I'll share with you some information about that in a few minutes. We're interested in outcome-oriented research that spans broad areas: natural, physical, social, behavioral, and economic sciences and engineering. And we'll talk specifically about what is meant by outcome-oriented research, and I'll give you some examples. And we want to fund research that has an end user identified or multiple end users identified, and we'll revisit that in a few minutes. And then finally, we want to fund research that will generate substantial long-term impacts in Texas, information or research that's going to make a difference for Texans, for Texas natural resources, and for our state. Okay, so moving along, I already told you that first bullet was Texas Sea Grant wants to support research that aligns with our strategic plan. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, you see the cover of our new strategic plan that is available for you. And I've already told you that our plan is required to align with the National Sea Grant Strategic Plan. The National Sea Grant Program is part of NOAA, and their strategic plan aligns with NOAA's strategic plan. And so as a NOAA-funded entity, Texas Sea Grant has a requirement to address the needs and the ideas and the goals that are identified by NOAA and the National Sea Grant Program. Our specific plan, however, does have some aspects of it that are unique, say from another state Sea Grant program, because we have very different needs here in Texas than other states have. And so we, every 2 years, get input from the public about our research priorities. And every 4 years, we solicit input from the public about our strategic plan goals. And so this new strategic plan was developed with input from stakeholders using public surveys. We also included input from our Texas Sea Grant Advisory Committee, and Texas Sea Grant staff provided significant input into the strategic plan, as well as into the research priorities that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So this is where we customize the information and the goals that are provided to us from our National Sea Grant Office and NOAA. And then lastly, I already mentioned that we are accountable for achieving the goals in this plan. And so every dollar that we spend goes towards the goals that are laid out in this plan. And some of them go towards research, some of them go towards extension and engagement, outreach, and education. So here are the goals that are in our new strategic plan. And I'm showing you just 2 of our focus areas. The first one is healthy coastal ecosystems. This has been the same focus area that we have had in our strategic plans for about the last 10 years. sustainable fisheries and aquaculture is the other focus area that I will focus on today within our strategic plan. So if you take a look at goal number 3 for the healthy coastal ecosystems, this goal is oriented towards Texas coastal habitats, ecosystems, and the services they provide. Those habitats, ecosystems, and services are protected, enhanced, or restored. And we do this in our extension work. We do this in our research funded projects as well. And the next goal is natural resources in Texas are sustained by applying science-driven solutions, tools, and services to support healthy coastal ecosystems. And so your research, if it falls within this focus area, will have to address one of these goals that is in our strategic plan. And Mia will talk more about how you select that in the pre-proposal process. The other focus area, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. Goal number 5 is that fisheries, aquaculture, and other coastal and freshwater living resources supply food, jobs, and economic and cultural benefits. And then finally, goal 6 is that our natural resources are sustainably managed to support coastal communities and working waterfronts, including commercial for hire, recreational, and subsistence fisheries and aquaculture. And so these are very broad focus areas, and there are a lot of different things that can fit in this focus area and these 2 goals. And likewise, there are a lot of different types of research that can fit within this focus area and these 2 goals. And so that shouldn't be a very difficult selection for you when you're at the pre-proposal phase, but it is an important selection because we need you to tell us how your research is going to help us achieve one or more of these goals. So moving along, I already mentioned that Texas Sea Grant wants to support research that responds to our research priorities. And if you have taken a look at our RFP for 2024 through 2026, you will have seen that we have the focus area, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, and the focus area, healthy coastal ecosystems, in the research priorities. We have 2 other focus areas in our strategic plan, but we are not soliciting projects in those areas at this time. And so if you have looked at our RFPs from previous funding cycles and are familiar with the work we have funded in the last 10 years, you'll notice that we have a very short list of research priorities this year compared to previous years. And there's a reason for that. We were asked by an external review committee that reviewed our program a few years ago to reduce the number of pre-proposals and full proposals we receive. And they suggested that we do that by reducing the number of research priorities in our research competitions. Now, the reason they suggested that is because we receive more pre-proposals every 2 years than any other Sea Grant program in the nation. And we have consistently received well over 100 pre-proposals. And that's a lot. Most Sea Grant programs receive on average about 30 to 40 pre-proposals. And so the committee suggested that we reduce the research priorities. And so we consulted with our staff, we consulted with our advisory board or advisory committee, and we took a look at the public input that was provided, and also looked at some current needs and emerging issues in the Gulf of Mexico, worked with our NOAA Sea Grant program officer to come up with this list. And so under sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, you see that our first research priority is oyster aquaculture. And we're not being specific here about what research you need to do within oyster aquaculture, because it's a new and growing and emerging industry here in Texas. And there may be a lot of different types of research that need to occur in that area. And so we're being very broad in terms of our requests for research in oyster aquaculture. The second bullet, I admit, I worded very poorly and do want to explain a little bit about this. We would like to see pre-proposals that propose aquaculture of species that are new to aquaculture in Texas, not new marine species. We don't want you to go out and find a new marine species and start propagating it. We are giving as a priority in our aquaculture portfolio species that are new to Texas aquaculture. And so, one example of this is there's a growing interest nationwide in aquaculture of seaweed and marine plants. And so that is not a group of marine organisms that is currently being grown in Texas, to my knowledge. Maybe it is, and I'm not aware of it. But that's an example of what we mean when we say aquaculture of new marine species. It may be a fish that has not been grown and used by industry previously. We're also interested in any kind of aquaculture research project. And so, we encourage anybody who's interested in aquaculture to submit a pre-proposal, recognizing that there may be priority for these other aquaculture projects. And so we welcome all aquaculture research projects. And then the last one here is a very specific research priority: shark depredation impacts and mitigation in commercial and recreational fisheries. This is an ongoing problem that has been identified in commercial and recreational fisheries. We've been asked by those industries that are impacted by it to help find a mitigation measure for that impact. And so that's why you see it here in our research priorities this time. So moving on to the next focus area, which is healthy coastal ecosystems. The 3 bullets that you see here are also very specific to some emerging needs in Texas and in the Gulf of Mexico in particular. So the first one is oyster reef harvest, restoration, and management. There have been some recent closures and threats of recent closures to particular reefs in Texas that have been quite controversial and would benefit from some research that may help everybody understand those issues and be able to make better management decisions with better science. So that is one of our priorities. Another one is disease outbreak at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. There was a recent disease outbreak in the last few years. There has been some research to help understand that, and we believe that that's an important area for research in the next few years that we hope some of you will submit pre-proposals to help us better understand that disease outbreak. And then lastly, we're interested in pre-proposals that address resistance, recovery, and resilience of the reef ecosystem at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, given that stony coral tissue loss disease is a significant problem in some areas in the Gulf of Mexico and Greater Caribbean, but has not yet been identified as a significant problem at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. We believe that this ecosystem potentially provides some helpful clues as to how its resilience, how it has been resilient and might be applied, those results might be applied to help us better understand the stony coral tissue loss disease that's occurring elsewhere. So these are our research priorities. Your research may not fall within these research priorities. And I suggest that if your research does not fall within these research priorities, that you don't submit a pre-proposal. because it will not fit within the request for this particular funding opportunity. So we also want to support integrated research and extension. And here is a nice figure that kind of illustrates what we mean when we talk about integrated research and extension. And so, you know, if you think about the two endpoints here, we've got a city. You can think of this as Corpus Christi, if you will. And here we have a university, and can think about this as Texas A&M Corpus Christi. And we like to bridge these two endpoints so that we're harnessing the intellectual capacity of our universities across the state of Texas to solve societal problems that are identified by our coastal communities. And we do that by engaging community members, using our county agents and extension agents, using our extension specialists, and combining their expertise in local needs and issues with university researchers and the scientific community. And so this represents really a two-way flow of information, one that goes in this direction and one that goes in the other direction. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. So it's a two-way flow of information. We want to know what the needs are from the coastal communities. We want to support those needs with research that's being done by the scientific community. And then we want to communicate the results of that research or translate the results of those research back to those communities so that we are bridging the knowledge to action axis. And that's what we do here at Texas Sea Grant. We have folks on staff who live and work in coastal communities across the state of Texas. They have significant trust relationships with their communities, and we depend on them to help us understand what's going on the ground, and they can help you with your research and are really outstanding people to engage early on in the development of your research projects so that you can get experts who are in the field already who can connect you to those communities, whether they're industry or associations or local governments. They can help you understand the needs and the issues and help you gain access to people, places, and other things. So we highly recommend that you work with our extension team, and you'll hear more about this from Mia in her section in a few minutes. Okay, so I also mentioned on the very first slide that we want to support outcome-oriented research. And there's a lot of information on this slide, and you're going to see it again. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to send it to you after this presentation. But this is a slide that shows you many examples of what we mean by outcome-oriented research. And we want to see outcomes from the research that we fund that, of course, lead to peer-reviewed and other publications. So that's a pretty standard outcome that most sponsors want to see. We would also like to see you reach students in PK through 12 levels. We'd love to see PK through 12 curricula developed and adopted by formal and informal educators. We'd like to see you involving students in your research project and seeing them be trained in and engaged in your research and helping to develop their scientific careers. So these are the kinds of things that you have likely seen from other sponsors in terms of outcomes. But there are other outcomes that are specific to Sea Grant funded research that I also want to talk about, and that are a bit unique to the Sea Grant model. So if you look over here we'd love to see you protect, enhance, or restore ecosystems and habitats, if that's the type of research that you're doing. We'd like to support the production or development of tools, technologies, and or information services. We'd like your research outcomes to have an impact on policy and or decision-making here in Texas or in a broader landscape. We'd love to see your research have an impact on regulatory action by regulatory agencies, such as the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We'd love to see your research have an impact on planning, an impact on mapping, an impact on coastal communities, resource management, businesses, industries. We'd love to see your research have an impact on economic and environmental development practices and policies. So I think you understand some of the things that we're looking for that are listed here. And I want to be real clear and let you know that there is no need to achieve all of these outcomes. And we don't ever give you any indication of how many of these outcomes we want you to achieve, because it is very dependent on the type of research that you are proposing. And so, you know, some of these are relevant to some research projects, but irrelevant to others. And so think about the outcomes that your research can yield, and try to fit some of these in the research that you are planning or proposing. And again, if you work with some of our extension agents and specialists, they can help you understand how your research could have an impact, and some of these other things that are listed here. So I'm going to come back to this in a few more minutes. We also want to support research with identified end users. And this is a requirement in the pre-proposal phase that Mia will discuss with you. And so end users are people who need your research results for some reason. And I've given you some examples of some end users that folks have listed in their pre-proposals and full proposals previously, and who were important to their research project. Those end users sometimes helped co-develop the research plan. Those end users helped extend the research results. And so the first bullet here is a local community could be an end user. And so an example is research that is used to help develop a local community's resilience plan. So let's just say the town of Flower Bluff has a resilience plan that they want to develop, and your research is going to help provide some science that is going to improve or strengthen their resilience plan. That would be one example of a local community that is an end user of your research. There are multiple examples of state agencies that are keen to receive research that can help them inform a specific management decision. And so there are multiple state agencies here in Texas. It could be Texas Council of Environmental Quality, could be Texas Water Development Board, could be Texas Department of Agriculture, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Multiple agencies are interested in good science to help inform management decisions. And so we encourage you to reach out to state agency partners who may be good end users of your research and are willing to work with you to develop that research and use that research after it has been completed. There may be some public groups that can benefit from your research. So one example is we funded many years ago research that would help the public understand where rip currents exist along the Texas coast, and would also help federal agencies understand how the public perceives the signage that they put on those beaches. So so there are a lot of different types of public health and safety issues that are specific to coastal and marine natural resources that your research may address. So that's just one example. But there are many examples that fit also within our focus areas and the research priorities that we're supporting this year. There may be non-governmental organizations that are interested in the research. There may be Nature Conservancy research interests in some of the oyster reef work, for example, that we're interested in supporting this year. So that's just one example of an NGO that you can partner with and work with as an end user. And then finally, industry is an important partner. We obviously in this specific RFP, we have industry represented in several of our categories. And so there are a lot of opportunity to partner with industry as you develop your proposal and then after your research has been completed. So we're going to ask you to identify an end user or multiple end users. So I want to give you an example of a previously funded project that really hit a lot of the buttons and really is a great example that I've used in previous presentations to help illustrate what we're looking for. And so over here, I've got the title of the project. It was a project that was developed and proposed and developed by Drs. Wetz and Hu at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and they were interested in hypoxia in South Texas estuaries and its relationships to watershed land use practice. It's a very applied research project that they developed with some communities that had some concerns about their watersheds and its impact on the fisheries that they depended on. So they partnered with the Coastal Bend Bays and Estuaries program in the Corpus Christi area. And they also partnered with the Baffin Bay Working Group. And then there were multiple other partners too, but I for sake of time and space, I've only included 2 of their partners here. Their partners helped them develop their proposal and help them extend the research results that they received from this project. The goal of the project was to identify factors contributing to hypoxia formation and habitat degradation in 2 important South Texas estuaries that ultimately led to targeted management efforts. And so here are the outcomes, or at least 2 of the outcomes. There have been dozens of outcomes that are really great outcomes of this research. The PI, Mike Wetz, is a founding member of the Baffin Bay Working Group, which is a coalition of scientists, citizens, state, federal, and NGO agencies that began working together to help address some of the environmental concerns in the Baffin Bay region and its watershed. And they've been honestly wildly successful at the work that they've done to address many of the issues and to get additional funding resources and additional state and federal interest in the problems that have plagued Baffin Bay for many years. So they've used their research results to educate local municipalities about the harmful effects of wastewater discharge entering the bay, how to minimize the discharge. They've educated private landowners about the harmful effects. They have sought conservation easements from some of those private landowners. They've done a lot of different things to make a difference using the results of their research that Texas Sea Grant supported in part. There have been a lot of sponsors of the research because it has been a really successful research project that has had some outstanding outcomes associated with it. And just to give you an example of the reviewer comments that we got when we sent this out for review, and I'm talking about the full proposal here. Reviewer number one said, this is an excellent proposal that will result in tangible benefits where resource managers can use the results from the study to mitigate environmental stressors resulting in hypoxia in South Texas estuaries and bays. This is the kind of reviewer comment we want to see in all of our full proposals that we send forward. We want there to be tangible benefits to resource managers. We want there to be tangible benefits to the natural resources. We want there to be tangible benefits to the communities. And so that's the kind of reviewer comment you should be thinking about achieving in your full proposals when you get to that stage. Reviewer number two gave us comments. Results from this study will provide answers to continuing environmental problems, such as hypoxia, and will enable resource managers to take specific mitigation measures. So these are just two examples of things that we want to see after somebody reads your proposal. So think about these things as you're developing your pre-proposal, as you're developing your full proposal. We want there to be some tangible benefits and outcomes that have some long-term benefits to our Texas coastal and marine natural resources. So going back to what does Texas Sea Grant want to fund? Again, we want to fund research that's aligned with our strategic plan goals. We want to fund research that addresses one of Texas Sea Grant's research priorities. We want to fund integrated research and extension projects that improve the understanding, wise use, and stewardship of Texas coastal and marine resources. We want to fund outcome-oriented research that spans broad areas of natural, physical, social, behavioral, and economic sciences and engineering. And we want to fund research that has an end user identified and research that will generate long-term impacts in Texas. And I want to emphasize also that while we are based at Texas A&M University, because Texas A&M University has been designated as the Sea Grant Institute in the state of Texas, we are required by the National Sea Grant Office to support universities across the state of Texas. We do not show any any allegiance to the university where we are located. And our entire RFP process is monitored by the National Sea Grant Office. We are required to follow their policy for research competitions. Our program officer watches us very carefully at every step of the way to make sure that we are transparent, objective, and that we are following policies and procedures and funding the best research that aligns with our strategic plan. And so there is no special awarding of extra points for people who come from Texas A&M University. We do not discriminate against other universities. And we do not show regional balance in our selection process. And so this is a competition that is run very much like the National Science Foundation's competition is run. And we try to reduce the conflict of interest throughout the entire process. And Mia will talk more about that. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions that you might have. And I'm going to stick around for a little while and be here at the end of the presentation to help answer any questions that might come up after me as part of the presentation has concluded. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Plotkin. So we will wait just a moment to see if there are any questions related to this part of the presentation. There was one question that was answered where the strategic plan is available. We have a link in our RFP. We have links on the Texas Sea Grant webpage for requests for proposals. So there are various locations where that link is accessible, and that, thank you, Allie, for answering that question with putting in the exact link to the strategic plan. Another question was, so the focus of this round is oyster and flower garden sanctuary. Our research funding priorities are as listed on page 2 of the research funding, the RFP document, and it's as displayed on the screen. So all of those items listed there are the focus areas and research priorities for this request for proposal funding opportunity.
We just got 2 more questions. Do we need to have cost sharing approved prior to submitting a pre-proposal?
No, thank you for the question. 50% non-federal cost share is required, but at the pre-proposal stage, we do not require a budget. And that is I'll go over the details of what is required in the pre-proposal phase, and within the request for proposal document, I think it's on page 4, where it lists the items that are required for the pre-proposal.
And then we also had a question wondering how exactly these priority areas were chosen.
Thank you. These were chosen because of their, some of them, because of current issues here in Texas and in the Gulf of Mexico that require research. And then, as I mentioned, we also solicited input from our staff. We have about 20 staff who live and work in coastal communities, and they communicate the needs of those coastal communities to us. We also rely on them to get involved in the research. And so we have a large group of folks who work in sustainable fisheries and aquaculture who are able and willing to help with you and your research project. And so that was also part of the consideration. We also relied on our public surveys that we sent out across the state of Texas. We also relied on our Texas Sea Grant Advisory Committee, and we also relied on the National Sea Grant Office and our program officer who oversees everything we do in our programming. So as I mentioned, we were asked to reduce the number of research priorities because we have a difficult time when we receive over 100 pre-proposals, having to find 3 reviewers for over 100 pre-proposals is a significant administrative burden. And then having to find 3 reviewers for well over 40 full proposals is an additional significant burden. Our National Sea Grant Office and its external review committee that reviewed our program a few years ago both recommended that we limit the research priorities so that we can reduce the number of pre-proposals that we receive. And so using that recommendation and using the feedback that we receive from our staff, from our advisory committee, from NOAA, and from our public surveys, this is how we developed our research priorities this year. I understand not everybody does research in these areas, and some of you will not be able to apply for a research grant this funding cycle. And I'm happy to answer any more questions that you might have about how these research priorities were selected.
So we have some more questions. I think this one has to do with that. It's about how we do not have the focus area resilient communities and economies in this request for proposals.
That's correct. It is not in this current request for proposals. That doesn't mean that area is not of interest to us. It just means that it's not in the current RFP. We have supported a lot of projects in that area previously. We have a lot of current projects currently funded in that area. And we are continuing to support that area with additional funding that is coming from the National Sea Grant Office in the next fiscal year. That is a high priority for the National Sea Grant Network and is going to be receiving additional research funding. So I ask you to look out for future RFPs that will be made available later this year when those competitions are announced.
Thank you. And then can you provide a bit more information about how to contact extension officers to help identify end users for new aquaculture species?
I think Mia has that in her presentation. Mia, is that in your part of the presentation?
Yes, and
Okay.
the actual pre-proposal template has a link to our Texas Sea Grant webpage, which if you just Google texasseagrant.org and go to that webpage, and on the menu, top right side of the menu drop down, you'll see the different topics about Texas Sea Grant. People, click on people, and you can see all of our staff at Texas Sea Grant and read a little bit about their background. And once we move into the full proposal stage planning process, after the pre-proposals are received and administratively reviewed and technically reviewed by reviewers and recommended for being encouraged to develop a full proposal, we will host a full proposal workshop the first part of March. I have 3 dates that we haven't settled on exactly yet, but all of the PIs who submit a pre-proposal to the pre-proposal phase, once those come in and have been reviewed and encouraged to develop into a full proposal, we will notify all of the researchers who've submitted a pre-proposal, and we'll also provide the review information, and I'll cover that in my part of the presentation. But during the full proposal workshop, you'll have an opportunity to learn more about the extension staff and their roles. But the people page on our web page will be the best great start for you to go.
And I can drop those links in the chat as well. We have one more question, and I don't know if Mia, you'll be answering this in your part, but as the grant focuses on the oyster industry, if we submit 2 proposals, one on oyster industry and the other on shrimp industry, will that be acceptable?
And yes, and Dr. Plotkin can add to my comment, the eligibility for submitting pre-proposals is a limit of 2 pre-proposals as a PI or a co-PI. And 1 grant award would be awarded to that specific PI. So you can submit up to two pre-proposals, but know that as a lead PI, one would only be awarded 1 grant.
Thank you. That was our last question.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will start off with then my presentation and share my screen for continuing my part of the presentation. And so as we move on then to getting ready to review the pre-proposal phase of this process. Again, Texas Sea Grant funded by NOAA is a unique partnership that unites the resources of the federal government, the state of Texas, and universities across the state to create knowledge, tools, products, and services that help the coastal communities, the marine industries, and the people of Texas. So it's a three-legged stool, as Dr. Plotkin talked about, the interchange between research and communities and education and outreach. It's all there. And we're actually 34 university-based Sea Grant programs across the nation, including Hawaii and a new Sea Grant program in Guam. And as Dr. Plotkin mentioned, our biennial research competition is in accordance with the required NOAA and National Sea Grant Research Competition Policy, as well as the gold standard guidelines from the National Science Foundation. And as we started off in the presentation by Dr. Plotkin, and just as a reminder, Texas Sea Grant supports research funding priorities that align with its strategic plan. Why? Because Texas Sea Grant is evaluated by NOAA. We're funded by NOAA, and so we federally flow those funds through as subawards to researchers across the state of Texas. And so we're evaluated by our prime sponsor on our research investments, the outcomes of these research investments, and the relevance of these investments to the identified needs at the state, in the state of Texas. And again, the strategic plan focus areas that we're focusing on for this funding opportunity is the sustainable fisheries and aquaculture and the healthy coastal ecosystems. And going back to a prior question related to the funding priorities under sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, where those funding priorities listed oyster aquaculture as well as aquaculture of other new marine species is aquaculture that funding priorities that we're looking at. So prior to developing a proposal, before you spend your time and effort in all that good work effort in creating a proposal, you will want to review that strategic plan that we've been talking about, our Texas Sea Grant strategic plan for 2024 through 2027, the focus areas, the goals, actions, and outcomes. And there's a link there, which is the same link that Allie shared for us. And so going at a higher level over the overall merit review process of our competition, our biennial research competition has two phases, the pre-proposal phase and the full proposal phase. All proposal reviews are guided by objective review criteria, which I will cover. So I will cover for you not only what is required, all of the elements that you are required to have in your pre-proposal, those will be the elements that will be objectively included as review criteria that reviewers will be using to review against your pre-proposal. And we select reviewers without conflict of interest. So the pre-proposals are reviewed and scored by at least 3 scholars and/or extension specialists. And the full proposals are reviewed and scored by external out-of-state peer reviewers and are also reviewed, scored, and ranked by an external technical review panel. So these scores and ranks will substantially inform Texas Sea Grant's decision to either encourage or not encourage pre-proposals for development into full proposals, and to fund or not fund full proposals. So every PI will be provided a notification by the 1st of March to be encouraged or not encouraged to submit a full proposal. Once we have full proposals due, I think it's mid-April, and those reviews are in later in the spring, and our technical review panel meets in June. Then those PIs will be notified in June as to whether they are recommended to be funded or not funded as full proposals. So that's just giving you that overall merit review process there. For contacting any questions, contact me for the proposal development type of questions, submission or review, or the InfoReady online system for submitting the pre-proposals. There's my contact information there. And then any inquiries regarding the funding priorities is best to contact Dr. Plotkin, and there is her contact information. And so going into the requirements of the pre-proposals at a high level, just wanted to have you understand, and you've read the RFP, that pre-proposals are to be submitted using the InfoReady online system in order to be eligible to submit a full proposal. The pre-proposals are due February 3rd before 5 o'clock, and the online system will automatically close at that time. So you can save your drafts, start a pre-proposal, work on it as often as you want, continue to save your drafts, but you must submit before February 3rd and before 5 o'clock. So the InfoReady online system is the gateway to the competitions that are managed by Texas Sea Grant College Program within the Texas A&M University's Division of Research. I've shared the link here that can take you directly to that homepage landing page. And then there's a separate specific link specifically for the pre-proposal phase of this competition. And so just giving you that overview there of where the InfoReady online system may be found, where the competition for the pre-proposal phase may be found. And then there is an InfoReady application guide located on our webpage at this link. And I'm just going to sneak over just right quick to our webpage here, texasseagrant.org, research funding, request for proposals, all of the information that you want to know about this proposal process, the timeline, some of the frequently asked questions that we've gotten on prior competitions, all of the resources, templates for the pre-proposal phase, for the full proposal phase, and additional documents. So I wanted to show that to you as a quick resource. So continuing with the pre-proposal requirements, for us, the Texas Sea Grant request for proposals pre-proposal is similar to an abstract, and no budget is required. And so there are, per the RFP, I've listed the same items that are required. So there are items 1 through 9. And starting out, the usual that you would see is your project title, a succinct title without jargon or acronyms, but a succinct title that identifies your project. Your lead PI and co-PI names and affiliations, your primary focus area and goals selected from the Texas Sea Grant Strategic Plan 2024 through 27 that we've been discussing. Those research funding priorities, you are to to select and choose which of those that were listed on the RFP page 2 that we've been discussing. And then an opportunity for you to, as you're thinking through your pre-proposal and your full proposal development, but at this pre-proposal stage, we do want you to think about integrating your research with education, outreach, and extension in those partners that would help with that integration of research with outreach, extension, and education. And so we will give you an opportunity for you to list those Texas Sea Grant Extension staff partners, collaborating partners, and the pre-proposal template, as I mentioned in answering one of the questions, over to our homepage, and I'm going to jump back over here again. So even at our homepage, whatever page you're on within the Texas Sea Grant web page, on menu, there's the people. And so you can go through all of the staff and get their background on their specialty and that sort of thing. So that gives you that way that you can then reach back over to then list who you might want to be partnering with if it's a Texas Sea Grant Extension staff. Now, you may have other partners and collaborators across the state of Texas that you would be partnering with for integrating the research with outreach, extension, and education. If you're not utilizing a Texas Sea Grant Extension staff as a partner, then we want you to list other partners of choice of whom you will be working with in that step. And then, as Dr. Plotkin has described, we want you to list the end users, singular or plural, identify those end users, define who will be using your research, and the goals and outcomes that would be identified by that user group. The 8th item then would go into your project description. And what we've done is we've made a pre-proposal template for you to complete, and we're wanting you to describe your project description in the form of objectives, rationale, and methodology. And then lastly, you may provide a list of suggested reviewers. We have a template that you can complete of suggested out-of-state reviewers who you believe are well qualified to review the proposal, but without conflict of interest. So again, focusing on those reviewers who would be out of state. You can also list those individuals whom you would prefer not to review your proposal. That's perfectly fine as well. So that's an optional document I've provided that you can include with your pre-proposal. And so with the objectives, rationale, and methodology of your project description, we want the content, we want you to describe that proposed research, and this is taken from our RFP. Describe the proposed research with objectives, rationale, methodology, clearly identifying how the proposed research will achieve the selected focus area, goal, and research priority that you've selected. And this is your intellectual merit statement. And then with your end users, the content would be to describe, again, who needs the results of your proposed research. You've done this, so now what? So what? How will it help others? How will it help Texans? How will the results be used and by whom? What are the likely outcomes and broader societal impacts of the use of the research results? This is typically considered the broader impact statement. And continuing with the pre-proposal requirements, formatting, because we have a template, you're not having to worry about margins and that sort of thing. But keep in mind these items that I've taken exactly from the RFP. The proposal is similar to an abstract, describes the project's objectives, rationale, and methodology. The content must be written in third person, informative to those working in the same or related disciplines and understandable to a scientifically literate audience, limiting jargon and acronyms and that sort of thing. So you can download the required pre-proposal template provided in the supporting documents and InfoReady, and I'll show you some screenshots there. Complete that document and re-upload it. The document is also on our webpage at the link there. And once you have completed your pre-proposal template, we want you not to exceed more than 2 pages. Save that PDF as pre-proposal _ with your last name. This was something I wanted to cover that we really have already addressed in a prior question, but investigators may submit no more than 2 pre-proposals as a PI and or a co-PI. And a successful investigator will receive a maximum of just 1 grant as a lead PI. And so once you have completed your pre-proposal, what reviewers will be looking at, and this is taken exactly from our RFP, is based on all of these elements within your pre-proposal, then the reviewers will be reviewing with 4 objective review criteria: the degree to which your proposed research will relate to Texas Sea Grant focus areas, goals, and research priorities identified in the RFP, the degree to which the proposed activity will contribute as an essential or complementary unit to other projects to reaching the strategic plan goals of the Texas Sea Grant program, and the degree to which it addresses the needs of important state, regional, or national constituencies, of which Dr. Plotkin has reviewed the importance of that. The other 2 review criteria will then be looking at the degree to which end users will use and benefit from the proposed research. And remember that one reviewer's comment that said specifically that, how important that Baffin Bay research project would be to those communities for those estuaries. So that's exactly what we're going to have our reviewers review against as well. And then finally, the degree to which partners are listed to integrate research with outreach, extension, and education by listing either Texas Sea Grant Extension staff or specialists or other partners of choice. And so once you have submitted your pre-proposal, the life after the pre-proposal submission process is that the pre-proposals will undergo an administrative review. They will undergo a technical review and will be scored by at least 3 scholars and or extension specialists without conflict of interest. Pre-proposals will then be encouraged or not encouraged for development into full proposals, and notifications and those blinded reviews and comments will be provided to the PIs by March 3rd. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will then have a full proposal workshop that will be scheduled for either March 8th, 9th, or 10th from 9 in the morning until 4, where we will provide an overview on how to package and develop a competitive full proposal, including integrating your research with education, outreach, and extension, and we'll make available our extension staff and specialists during the workshop, where you can then be able to reach out and talk with them more as you develop your full proposal over that next month, almost month and a half, when full proposals will be due by April 14th in the InfoReady system. And so this slide, I want to give you just a quick overview of the steps of submitting a pre-proposal in InfoReady. And so we have our InfoReady online system, Texas Sea Grant homepage, and the link to come to the landing page here, where you can see that the opportunities for Texas Sea Grant in InfoReady is the pre-proposal phase of this competition. And so we have, again, taken these instructions exactly word for word from the RFP, page 4 of the RFP, and note that InfoReady works best with the Firefox or Chrome browsers. There's an InfoReady application guide. So within the InfoReady system, there are supporting documents that are all there, not only in the InfoReady system, but also on our webpage. And so that InfoReady application guide is a great resource for you to look at on quickly navigating the InfoReady system. But you can also then go directly to this pre-proposal competition link here, and then you would actually click on apply to that pre-proposal phase. And the system will then prompt you to log in with your NetID credentials if you're internal to Texas A&M University. If you are an applicant external to Texas A&M University, the bottom left side of the login page will have a register button, which will allow you can click on the register button, and it will walk you through the process to register as an applicant. And so the request for proposals and other guidelines, this InfoReady application guide, and the templates are all available there for you to download, review, complete, re-upload for submitting your pre-proposal. The InfoReady system will walk you through the required fields for completion. It's very user-friendly. There's the available supporting documents will include that Texas Sea Grant 2024-26 pre-proposal PDF template. Download it, complete it, and save that template with the file name pre-proposal underscore the lead PI's last name, re-upload, and then save as a draft. So you can do this as often as you need. Just any changes you want to make, just continue to save as a draft. This template is the required document for submission of the pre-proposal. Once you are in the InfoReady pre-proposal application, which I'll walk you through in just a second. Again, I'm just giving you a quick download dump of the steps for the pre-proposal. But once you're in the application, you will complete all the required InfoReady pre-proposal application fields. That's typical. All your PI information, your co-PI information, etc. You would complete all those pre-proposal application fields as well as that template. You know, it will kind of seem like it's a duplication, but we need it within the InfoReady application system itself, as well as on the template. Then you may also download that optional list of suggested reviewers, complete that, and save as reviewers underscore with your lead PI's last name, re-upload, again, just save as a draft. And so again, as I've mentioned, you may make edits at any time. Before the deadline, save as a draft as often as needed. So note, there's only one opportunity to submit. So just keep saving as a draft. But when you're ready to submit before February 3rd at 5 o'clock, then you will check the acknowledgement of pre-proposal submission checkbox, and I'll show you that in a moment. That will activate the system submit button. Then you click on the submit button, and once that pre-proposal is submitted, it is considered final and no further edits can be made. So the online InfoReady online system homepage for Texas Sea Grant with this link this is the landing page that you'll see. The login information here is where you would log in. And once you click on that, it will take you to the next page that I'll show you. But again, if you come to just this link, the Texas Sea Grant homepage link, you'll see our competition down here at the bottom. So if you click on login, it will take you then to a login screen. If you're within A&M, you just click on the link here and it will take you through the steps of logging in with your net ID. Otherwise, here's where I referenced earlier, the lower left-hand side registration button. If you're outside of Texas A&M University at another university or college or organization, simply click on register and it will step you through that process of registering. So I'm going to show you just quickly I think what I'll do is just take you to the next slide will be the easiest thing. So once you have logged in, the landing page for that opportunity, and you can get to this point here as well as, and I'm going to back up to this second link. You can click, and these links are on our webpage too. So you can click on this specific competition link and it will take you to the login page and will take you to this specific funding opportunity. And so this page that you're seeing is an overview of the opportunity. It describes the RFP. So when I had logged in, it's telling me that everything related to this specific competition. It's reminding me that I can only submit 2 applications. It's due in February 3rd. $800,000 because we're funding research that would include both direct and indirect costs of up to $200,000 per year for a 2-year grant. And so let me scoot over to our RFP quickly. So $800,000 per year will be available to support up to 4 proposals, contingent on availability of funds from NOAA. And so proposal budgets will be no more than $200,000 in combined direct and indirect costs per year, with 50% non-federal cost sharing required. But again, the pre-proposal phase doesn't require a budget, but this is just all that same information related to the pre-proposal phase of the Texas Sea Grant RFP 2024 through 26. And here, always on this right side of the menu are all of the supporting documents. You have the InfoReady application guide that I mentioned, which is a user resource. The strategic plan is available here. The RFP is available here. The pre-proposal template is available here, as well as that optional reviewer list. So this is the details section of the RFP pre-proposal phase. And to start a proposal, then you simply click on apply. And once you click on apply, you'll go into the application portion of the pre-proposal phase. So here you're in my application. Again, here are all those supporting documents, and I'm going to move back because I don't know. Yeah, all of those supporting documents, if you click on that PDF, you can either click on each one and open them and save them. It will also combine them all into one PDF here, so I just wanted to point that out to you quickly. Then jumping back into the application. So here is Mia Z-PI. So I would fill out the typical info-ready application fields. The majority of these fields are required. And again, as most online systems, you have the typical reminder that any field with an asterisk means it's required. So complete and submit the application below. Your entries are automatically saved while you're working and as you go from page to page. But whenever you're at the point where you feel like you may have to leave and you want to come back, again, then just save it as a draft. So the lead PI information, co-PI information, you just click on the button and add your co-PIs. The next section of your application is related to the pre-proposal itself. So those same 9 elements, you're entering into the fields in the info-ready application system. They are required. So those same fields here, the focus area with the drop down to select which one. If you have a secondary focus area you're wanting to select, that's optional, but you'd have to at least select that primary focus area: sustainable fisheries and aquaculture or healthy coastal ecosystems, ecosystems. And then your funding priorities, where you have your primary funding priority is a required selection, and then an optional second priority is another option. Here I've provided the field for you to list your extension staff. There's that the link to get back to our people page again to make it easy for you. And I just jumped ahead when I didn't mean to. Or list other partners that you're going to be collaborating with to extend your research out into education, extension, and outreach. And then list your end users here. And then the next section within the application is the area where you upload your documents. So again, going back to the resources of the supporting documents here, whether you've downloaded the pre-proposal template from here or from our webpage, or the reviewer list here from this resource site, then once you've completed them, this is the area within the application where you then would upload your files. So that pre-proposal template is the required document here that you would upload. And then the suggested reviewer list is optional. So I'll give you an idea of just a screen print right here of the pre-proposal template that you must complete. It has the same fields, and I've made it such that those that are required are outlined in red. So the same information listed with title, succinct title, lead PI, institution, etc. on co-PIs, your primary focus area that's required, your secondary focus area is not required, but gives you that option to select. Your funding priority of 1 priority is required in that drop-down box, and then there's an optional second priority that you can choose from. Again, the fields for listing those extension staff that you will be wanting to partner with to integrate the research with extension, outreach, and education, or those other partners that you so choose to use instead of to integrate your research, and then listing those end users. So then we have 3 text boxes: 1 for you to enter your objectives, 2 to enter your rationale, and 3 to enter your methodology. And that's it. But we want you to make sure that once you've entered that information, I don't have, because Max and other computers are different, setting field restrictions. It doesn't always work in form fields, but we want you to, once you have completed your document, make sure it still does not exceed 2 pages. And so I have a live document here that shows you again that information. So the objectives, so your optional fields of the focus areas, the funding priorities, the second optional, and if there's no second, then you can select, I've added that field to select a no second funding priority. The field for listing your extension staff collaborators or other partners of choice, your end users, objectives, methodology, and rationale. And so to take this a little bit further, I had my own pre-proposal template that I completed. And so Mia Z, I went to Wee Aggieland Kindergarten here in College Station, so that's my institution. Your project title, while the fields will extend, do try to keep your project title succinct in identifying your topic of your proposal without it going more than two lines would be useful for reviewers when they're quickly reviewing the documents. I've made selections on my focus area, and I chose not to have a secondary focus area. So my proposal on Mary Had a Little Lamb, the extension staff that I'm going to be using is Miss Lamb-Herder, who resides in Galveston. But I think I might have other partners that I will be collaborating with to integrate my research with outreach, extension, and education. And so there's an end user called Lambs Inc. that will, once they tell me what their address is, that will be one of my collaborating partners as well. And my list for end users on my Mary Had a Little Lamb proposal, well, gosh, grazers and herders everywhere. I don't want to be exhaustive, but that's my end user that I have listed. Of course, obviously you want to be more succinct there. So again, I haven't put any fields limitation on this, but just make sure that as I am trying to, on my objectives, be succinct, that my proposal objective will be to ensure that lambs are herded properly. My methodology is to watch lamb sites on a quarterly basis and explain that information here, but not to go to the point where it exceeds 2 pages again. My rationale, well, why not? We all like lambs. So that's as a finance major, that's my scientific proposal that I can share with you at this time. And so moving forward, when you're ready to submit your proposal, you can simply, and do this with when you're saving as a draft, to preview it, simply click on the download PDF button at the top of the page, and it will download all of your content that you've entered in the InfoReady application. All of those fields will be displayed, as well as your the upload of your pre-proposal template will all be in that one document, as if you're a reviewer, so that you can review your own proposal even before you submit. So be sure to take advantage of downloading your documents that you've entered and saved as a draft. And then before you submit, again, submit prior to when that system closes automatically at 5 o'clock on February 3rd. So when you do receive when you're at the point of getting ready to submit, where I had talked about, and I'm going to jump back to my overall questions here. So when you're ready to submit, check the acknowledgement of pre-proposal submission checkbox. So that's the page I was showing you over here. If I'm not making you too dizzy. There is, at this page where you save or submit, there's that checkbox. And then the submit button, once you clicked on that. So you're acknowledging that this pre-proposal may be saved as a draft as often as needed, and that there's only one opportunity to submit the pre-proposal. So understand that after saving as a draft, when you're ready to submit, checking the acknowledgement of a pre-proposal submission checkbox, which activates the system submit button, will allow you to click and submit the final version of the pre-proposal. Once the pre-proposal is submitted, the pre-proposal submission is considered final and no further edits can be made. And so that's here at this step. Once you make your submission, you'll receive a confirmation email, and it's simply from the InfoReady system. Of course, that you will have received that before Monday at 5 o'clock on the 3rd, with the subject header of your PI name and the competition you're responding to, and it's confirming that receipt of your submission. And so I've gone over all of the pre-proposal requirements, the pre-proposal process via the InfoReady online system, but I wanted to end with reviewing this page as you're thinking ahead to then developing your pre-proposal into a full proposal once you're recommended to develop a full proposal. As our Texas Sea Grant Biennial Research Competition is federally flowing through our Omnibus Award, Prime Award from NOAA and from the Department of Commerce, and all of the guidance and guidelines that are required by NOAA and other agencies in complying with rules and regs. The same sort of thing, those terms and conditions are flowed down through to your award. So think in terms ahead of time of looking at your proposal having a documentation that needs to be approved before your full proposal is recommended for funding. So we want you to be aware of that. That all NOAA funded research projects must comply with NEPA, with the National Environmental Protection Agency, and their guidelines for environmental considerations of work done at sites. Some of the researchers may remember the old 25-page NEPA form that had to be submitted with proposals. Well, the NOAA and the National Sea Grant Office has created an abbreviated version of that questionnaire. It's called the Abbreviated Environmental Compliance Questionnaire. That document must be completed for the full proposal. We're not requiring it at the pre-proposal stage, but we want to bring this to your attention to the forefront because the questionnaire must be completed with inclusion of relevant and proper permits, any permits that are necessary. The actual copies would be included as a PDF with your environmental compliance questionnaire. If you're in the process of getting a permit approved and you've put in a request for a permit, say with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, for example, then that questionnaire would need to document that you have requested that permit from that agency. And when, at what date you're expecting to get that permit. So all of that information needs to be addressed or enclosed, including those partner institution subrecipients. So if you might have any collaborating co-PIs at other institutions that would be subawards on your proposal, the lead PI is responsible for making sure all of this documentation is included with their full proposal. And so there's just one questionnaire, not for multiple institutions for that PI's full proposal. But that lead PI needs to make sure that they are including everything related to what might be necessary at those institutions of their co-PI. So it is a responsibility for acquiring permits. It lies with that funded lead PI. And wanting to give you that information, because failure to secure permits may result in delayed receipt of funds from NOAA and from Texas Sea Grant, delayed receipt of funds with a special award condition placed on that award, and not until those permits are received and we submit those documents subsequently to NOAA to satisfy that award condition, the work on that part of the project cannot be begun. So we really want you to think ahead. Pre-proposals due 1st of February, full proposals due April 14th. The time it's going to take for you to get institutional approvals, not only for NEPA, for IRB, for IACUC, all of that needs to be taken into consideration because that does take time. So as you draft your full proposal, consider the timing needs for the questionnaire completion, for the securing of permits, as well as other institutional compliance office requests for animal welfare and or human subject protocol approvals. So you can, if you're going to have questionnaires, samples, surveys, you have to get the exemption that for the human subject protocol. So all of that takes time. Visit our website for forms, guidance, and examples of the types of the NEPA questionnaires for completion. This will ensure timeliness to have that NEPA form completed accurately with approvals and documents in order. Now, the NEPA form will not be required at the full proposal stage. When proposals are recommended for funding in June, then that questionnaire and all those permits, all of that needs to have been addressed, completed, documentation received and approved within that timing when notifications come in June on the full proposal. So work on your full proposal for mid-April as if you've got that document ready to go. But the 1st of June, that document needs to be ready to go. Also, seek advisement from your institutional compliance office as needed. And I'm going to jump back over to our web page to the request for proposals web page. The resources under pre-proposals and under full proposals. I'll make the screen a little bit bigger. The NEPA requirement is covered here. The National Sea Grant Office has been good enough to provide to us 3 different types of examples of this NEPA form completed as if it had to do with a project related to field work or lab work or socioeconomic type work of a proposal. And there's step-by-step guidance on walking you through each of the questions on that form. So I've given that heads up for you there, I hope. And so here we are at 11:41 and questions are coming in. Thank you for your participation, but we'll look for questions at this point. And let's see. I don't know whether to go with.
We have a few. Do you want me to read some for you?
Yeah, why don't you? Because I amazingly enough, I made it through this webinar without going through a coughing fit. So let's see if you can read it.
We'll try to keep it going.
Yeah.
So regarding the Texas Secret Extension staff partners, is the idea for investigators to not communicate with them before the pre-proposal is submitted, given a potential for conflict of interest? Or are they expecting some investigators to contact them before February 3rd?
That's an excellent question. Now, we want you to reach out so that you can have an idea. The full development, of course, will come later, but any of the reviewers that we have of our pre-proposal, we look to ensure that there are not any conflicts of interest. So just focus on your topic and what you're wanting to achieve in your outreach and your broader outreach with extension education and outreach, and reaching out to our Texas Sea Grant staff is what we want you to do. But do feel confident that, as we're very transparent with not only just the nature of our competition, but we're required by policy to avoid conflict of interest, and we look for that too. So if for whatever reason there might be any question of a conflict of interest, we will not have that particular individual review a pre-proposal.
And then this person wanted more information on cost sharing. Could you expand on how this typically looks like and how it's achieved? And are they required to fundraise with extension partners, NGOs, or do we work with our institutional development office for this?
Again, that's another great question. I'll jump over to our RFP, which since the pre-proposal doesn't cover the budget requirements, it's all listed under the full proposal section. So as I jump down to full proposal and what's required there under the budget section, I do give descriptions on what is needed in the budget narrative. There's also not only specific requirements of what needs to be completed in the full proposal for the budget narrative, but there is also a link on our webpage and in our RFP that gives, let's see if I have it here. Yes, there is a NOAA Grants Management Division's budget narrative guidance document that takes you through each budget category to make sure you're answering and displaying in your written verbiage, in your written text of your budget justification, how a grants reviewer would need to see your budget justification outlined by budget section. So that gives you excellent guidance there. But under the section related to mandatory cost share, I have a paragraph related to that. And so it has to be non-Fed funds, 50%. So your direct and indirect federal request, your federal Sea Grant budget request, 50% of that per year is the amount that you want to show on the 2-year budget of your cost share budget. And it has to be exactly 50% of the requested funds for each year of the project, not less than 1 year or more in 1 year and less in year 2. It can't be just in total, it has to be by year. So we have budget forms that have 2 columns per year, Fed funds or Sea Grant requests, your cost share requests, so you can see it right there per year and then in total. But similar to all federal sponsors, cost share must be from a non-federal source. It is a legally binding commitment that is proposed to the sponsor at the time that you're submitting your proposal. So you're obligating your university with the cost share that you have committed to on your budget and in your budget narrative and in your institution's letter of commitment to commit those resources. And so as such, cost share is required to be easily tracked for reporting purposes to the sponsor. For, make this a little bit bigger, for every dollar spent on the sponsor's funds, 50% of like dollar is the committed cost share that's required to be reported to the sponsor. So your institution has to report, or your organization has to report every time you spend $2, your institution's office has to report $1 back to the sponsor. So it makes sense, and most institutions require then for cost share to be an easily trackable type of cost. And what is the most easily tracked type of cost to be shared would be personnel cost share effort and tuition. Well, personnel cost share effort, you've got your payroll system. There's the reporting system that is easily tracking that PI or co-PI's effort on a proposal that they've committed to cost share. That's an easy way to track that. Student tuition is another system that is easy to track as a cost share type. Other types of cost share, third-party cost share, while it's not necessarily encouraged, it's acceptable, but only if proper evaluation is provided by detailing in both your budget and budget justification these items: the unit cost of that resource, the number of units, the value and source of funds, and then a formal letter of cost share commitment is required with the authorizing signature of the institutional letterhead stationery, referencing that proposal title, the lead PI, the period of performance dates for that proposal from February 1 of 2024 to 1/31 of 2026, the RFP opportunity name, statement of work and service that you're providing as cost share, and then that budget amount, the daily, hourly rate or hours, that total amount described in your budget justification, so that the grant reviewer can see, oh, I see how they came up with that cost, and here's the documentation to support it. Here's the institution's letter committing to that cost share, and that total amount on the budget justification ties back exactly to the dollar amount on the budget form. So you're wanting to make something cost shared to be non-federal, easily trackable, and well documented. So I give this example, and it's probably not the best example, but if I was a PI and I wanted to have the value of a tractor as an asset, and I provided the depreciable value of the asset of that tractor on my proposal, then when I got awarded the award a year later, that tractor got knocked out by a hurricane, and I no longer have that cost share item, then you've lost your commitment on your cost share and the documentation and commitment to support your project, and your sponsor could pull your award. And I'm going to extremes, but that is true. So you want something that's trackable. Volunteer effort, you can Google the value of the hourly wage earner value of a volunteer's contribution. There's your hourly current rate, and then you write out, how many volunteers you might be expecting your citizens volunteer group that you're collaborating with on your proposal, and justify that in your budget justification.
And then we have a few more. For environmental compliance, is it acceptable for a full proposal if the co-PI has a permit and the PI is listed on that permit?
Well, I'm not sure, I don't know if Dr. Plotkin can step in. It seems that for environmental compliance, for a full proposal, if the co-PI has a permit and this permit, I think you would have to get a permit related to that specific project that would be used on that specific project with that lead PI.
Okay, so then the last one, and then we have a hand raised, is that I guess they want a little more clarification on the pre-proposal template under the objectives, methods, and rationale box. How much text can you add there?
Well, that's a good question. So probably the best way to do that is, drafting, you're drafting a Word doc and copying and pasting, those words into those text boxes, and then making sure that once your final versions are in those 3 text boxes, along with your questions that you answered above in the template, that the whole document itself, once it's saved as a PDF, does not exceed 2 pages. So remember, the pre-proposal for this purpose is like an abstract. So it's not a proposal narrative. It's a description of your project broken out into those 3 fields of objectives, rationale, and methodology.
Thank you. So then our last thing is Lauren has her hand up. I cannot unmute her, so you'll have to do that, Mia.
Okay, let's see if I can do that.
Oh, she just put it down, so maybe she.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's
there,
back.
there she is. Okay. Go
Hi,
ahead. Hi, Lauren.
I just had a quick question about particularly the aim related to resilience at the Flower Garden Banks and funding for sampling for comparative, like out-of-state sampling. Will you fund sampling that's not in Texas in the context of that aim and understanding why resilience occurs at Flower Garden Banks?
I think that would be acceptable. I will defer for a confirmation on that with Dr. Plotkin.
Yes, it's acceptable. As long as it's applied back to the flower garden banks.
To that objective, yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
It looks like that's all the questions we had.
Okay. We can wait just a little bit longer, and attendees may stay or drop out, but thank you again. Thank you for your participation, your patience with any IT nuances, and we thank you for attending. Email me with any questions, or Dr. Plotkin.